Good morning, Lexi!
Now your microphone is working very well.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
and I didn't touch him.
Yeah, this is this
Yeah,
is good.
yeah.
Well, my friend, today it is a special day for us, right?
Yeah, not the last one because I think we have another guest this week. I think.
Yeah, we have a new guest tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah, but
tomorrow
our
we have.
list is finishing, and I need to invite other guests because we need
Yeah, we
to
have
yeah yeah
to fill our backlog, right?
to maintain
Yeah.
the I don't know the
The
frequency we
frequency,
need.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
today is special day because we are recording at Sunday, right?
especially for this moment for this
Yeah, this is a special moment for design team. Puriti and I are very anxious about that because I think this is a icon, a key moment for us, right? A great
yeah
achieve.
yeah. A huge challenge because our list is increasing the difficult. I think we are increase the difficult to create not just the content, but create new perspective for the content. Not just to interview someone or to talk about one subject. We are trying to make our content more flow, I suppose. Yeah, more flow, and not having a script. And we are talking more
Oh,
free.
yeah. We're trying to interact, right, with your guests in a free way, without script, just a
Yeah.
chat, right?
And some of
Well,
them ask us about it.
exactly. That's why I'm talking about. Some guests are asking us, okay, without script, let's just chat.
Mhm.
Yeah, and today, if you are here watching us, you know who.
Of course, because
Yeah.
it's in the tail title.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like I
There is a
said,
thumb with his
his
photo, and
face, yeah, here.
yeah.
So you know, we achieved that. We will speak with Donald Norman.
And probably if you are in our Telegram channel, you are screaming for in the Telegram channel about it. And of course, I think you know, and you enjoy this. I
Yeah, I
promise.
believe so. I believe so. But first, I have to ask you, please join us, subscribe the channel, right? Comment,
Yeah.
yeah, send us your thoughts, what you are thinking. So yes, today it's special day. I'm very nervous. Yeah, sorry.
But bring us your perspective, your
Yeah,
opinion, your I don't know, your wish about the content and new guests. Please help
yeah.
us to
Help
create
us.
this content. Yeah,
Yeah. So okay, enough.
and feel free,
Uh,
not just um, I don't know. I forgot the word.
Speaking Portuguese, I
Yeah,
can
you
add
can
it.
complain. You can complain too about the contents, not just yeah.
You can tell us, oh, I don't like this, right? Yeah, I don't like this. Oh, guys, you are so right. You can bring your you can bring
Because we
positive
yeah
and negative things. You can bring that.
because we actually want to increase
Yeah,
content.
you can criticize us.
Yeah, I am enjoying a lot because for me it's a kind of fun moment, not just creating content, but we want to increase. And feel free, give us your feedback,
Yeah,
positive or
so
negative or constructive.
concert. Oh, so okay, that's enough. Let's
Okay,
call your special superstar guest.
No.
No. Sorry, Don.
Yeah.
But come on. Let's start with Donald Norman. So, thank you so much to join with us. It's a great pleasure to have you here. You're a reference for us. I'm speechless about this moment. It's very important to me. So thank you so much. And Rafael and I are in love for this moment.
I was expecting this a lot.
Yes. And we usually ask our guests to introduce themselves, but with you, it doesn't make sense for our followers. You are the most well-known face. So, Don Norman, guys, with you here in DesignTeam, it's amazing. It's a great moment. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to start asking you a question to open your chat. Can you see the influence of the changing generations arising and working with user experience design over the years? Can you, in your work, see the most impactful difference between different generations of designers?
A little bit. What I'm really hoping for, though, is a major change in the next few years or decades. But let me talk about the changes so far. The history of design is maybe just a couple of phases. That there were some people in the early years of design, before we really had a profession of design. They usually came from advertising or from theater design and so on. And there were not many people, but they had vast dreams and they were able to do actually magnificent things in design because they weren't making little things. They were trying to change the world. So one of the early famous designers, and unfortunately, I can't remember which one right now, was asked by a company if they could make the scale for weighing food for grocery stores better. And so he went around and looked at grocery stores and so on and said, yes, he could do a better scale for them, but they would not be able to make it in the factory they had. So first he would design them a new factory, and they had to use the new factory to design this new scale. Now, we don't have designers today who could do that. I don't mean who couldn't possibly do the designs, but who could convince somebody to do that. That took a lot of courage and persuasion. And so many designers did it that way. They had when they were asked to do something, they stepped back and they said, what could we really do? What could really make a big difference? And we don't have that anymore. So today, design is really thought of as, from the very beginning, when the very first designers existed, which was the Wedgwood factory for making dishes and pottery in England. What designers were painters, and they made the dishware, the pottery, more attractive, and they could sell it. Therefore, it was the first company that tried to sell attractive dishware to everyday people, not just to the royalty or to the rich. But designers were just basically, just make it look pretty, paint pretty directions on it. And so ever since then, with the exception of the major big designers I've mentioned, designers were in the middle level of things. They didn't have any power. They had to do whatever their company asked to do. If they had a consultancy company, they had to do whatever their clients asked them to do. In the university, design, if it even existed, was usually stuck in the arts department or maybe the architecture department, and they were not considered the major fields in the university. Why? So first of all, design shouldn't be an art. Design is not art. Artists are doing wonderful things and they do play an important role in society. I like artists. I have a lot of art. I buy their material, but artists are expressing their own points of view. And quite often they want to make you sensitive to conditions that they experience. Designers aren't doing that. Designer is designing not for themselves, they're designing for you, the people. So designers have to understand the people. So we shouldn't be in our department. So we shouldn't give, in the United States, we give people in art, in design, a bachelor's of fine arts or a master of fine arts. We shouldn't. We should use the design degree, bachelor of design, master of design, PhD, or even a doctor of design. PhD would be for the academics who want to do research in how design should be done. And the DDes, Doctor of Design, is for practitioners. And that's already done in engineering. There's a DEng degree and an engineering degree, and et cetera. But when the companies, then, designers have no say in what's being made. And that's wrong. We can come back to that later. And the major change that has happened in design in the last 20, 30 years has been the development of human-centered design, where we actually focus upon actually what the people need, and we don't imagine what people need, but we don't ask them what they need, but we go and we watch and we try to understand what is going on. And that's been a very important development, because up to then, designers would simply in their heads imagine what people would need. And they were often quite wrong. In fact, even when we watch and we think we understand their needs and we build something, it's often wrong, which is why an important part of human-centered design is don't do that. Sure, figure out what you think the important needs are, but then test it. And so we have a whole technique of doing tests overnight, quickly. You don't have to, engineers think you can't test until you finish the entire thing. No, we can test with paper and pencil, with cardboard, with foam, with imagination. So those are the major differences. But now just one more sentence. I warned you, I give big answers to simple questions. One more sentence is I think, and I'm hoping, that their design is about to change dramatically. Not only is the world changing, not only are the tools that we use changing, and not only are the needs changing, but for the first time, we should really be approaching societal needs. Hunger, homelessness, education, healthcare. This is what we should be approaching. It's basically, I'm wearing this pin. You can't quite see it. There it is. Those colors are the 17 colors of the United Nations Sustainable Development Issues. We should be looking at all 17 of those and approaching, looking at the problems that really make a difference in the world.
As designers, we are working as just hand workers, just doing what they asking what we do, not thinking about these things that you brought us. You think you need to be more thinkers about this?
Well, it's more than that. For example, we make in modern computer and cell phone design and even home consumer goods, we make things beautiful and attractive. And how do we do that? We use exotic materials, or we bond them together. We bond wood and leather, and we bond things together. It makes it very nice to touch and feel and use and look at, and destroys the environment. Because in fact, once you bond it together, you can't take them apart. So that when it's over with, when you throw it away, you can't reuse the components. And we make our computers and our cell phones so thin and lightweight that we don't use screws, we use glue. And we don't put batteries in a container so you can replace the battery. We make the battery as thin as we can, and we squeeze it into space so it can't be removed. And so we destroy the environment in mining to get the materials required to make these beautiful devices. We destroy the environment during the manufacturing process, where we emit poisonous fumes into the air, into the land, into the water. And we destroy the environment afterwards, because what could you do with it when you're finished? Why do you recycle it? This stuff can't be reused, mostly. And so there are big piles of junk all around the world, often burning because batteries are still in them, and batteries after a while get hot and catch fire. But you can't come and tell your company you can't make this, it's destroying the environment, because they will say, well, first of all, you can't come with a problem. So I was an executive. I was a vice president at Apple and an executive at HP. Let me tell you, executives don't want to hear problems. It's not that they don't want to know bad news. It's that they want solutions. Telling them the problems doesn't do any good because they have to then find the solutions. Well, you should come up with the solutions. But second of all, companies in today's world are trying to make profits. Now, profit isn't bad because a company has to stay in business, has to pay its workers, has to pay all sorts of stuff for the equipment, for the buildings, for the electricity, the energy to run the buildings. But there's an obscene approach to making as large a profit as possible. And if you say, oh, we have to be sensitive to the environment, well, that might cost more money. And so that will mean people won't buy their goods because they're more expensive. So we have to deal with ways of overcoming that. And you can ask me a question later about my ideas. One thing I believe in design is that it's easy to make criticism. It's hard to think of the answers. And so I try hard not to criticize unless I have suggestions about how to proceed. But these are major difficulties. Designers are not trained to do this. Designers often don't know anything about the world because what you do if you go to design school is you learn how to draw, you learn how to sketch, you learn how to do materials, you learn about manufacturing. If you're in digital, you learn some programming, you learn about, interaction principles. But you don't learn about the world, economics. You don't learn about the environment. You don't learn about business practices. Yet, if we want to convince business people, we have to speak the language of business people. Many designers ask me, how can they convince their company to take them more seriously? So I ask them, so what do you do? And they say, we show them our wonderful designs and ideas. We tell them the prizes we've won. And I say, yeah. If I were your boss and you came to me doing that, I would smile and listen and say, yes, that's all very good. We know you're good. That's why we hired you. So thank you very much. But now I must get to work. If you want to convince them to take you seriously, you have to come up with a new idea that will help the company. And you have to talk their language. You don't show them the drawing of the idea. Yeah, you should do. You show them the drawing or show them a mock-up. But that isn't what will decide. You have to show them a spreadsheet that shows increased sales, increased profits, or increased margins. You have to understand what those words mean. Or if not, then maybe decreased cost. And you want to show them the increase in number of people who will be using the product. Now, designers always tell me, oh, how can we do that? It's a new product. How do we know those numbers? Well, any designer who works at a company knows that marketing says we must add these 3 new features to our device. How do they convince anybody? They show the spreadsheet. It'll make it better. Everybody will buy it more, even though it maybe makes the device harder to use. But how do they do this? Well, they lie. They make up the numbers. And I say, well, we can lie and make up numbers just like they can. In fact, what we ought to do is become partners with marketing and ask them to help us. Now, when you do this, the executives are smart because they used to do this themselves. They know those numbers are not real. But they know that there's no other choice when you're trying to invent a new device or you want to say, we have to be more sustainable. We have to be more appropriate for today's world. Okay, but nobody is doing it. So how do we know how that will change the market? So you have to have good reasons for the numbers. And what they do is they try to imagine if this is a good thing. They try to say, is your reasoning sensible? Do I agree with the logic that you're using? And if so, they'll take you seriously. And that's a very different skill. The marketing people learn that when they go to get their Master of Business Administration, MBA degree. That's what they're taught how to do. So we want to teach designers how to do that.
Yeah, I think as you are saying, in my opinion, the approach about to be focused on the user isn't enough anymore. Okay, we need to have other perspectives in our career, not just to understanding the user and explain their needs for the company. We need to understand the business too. We need to understand how the companies works too, or what makes the company reach their goals. We need to understand more. And I have seen your talks and speeches about it, about education, about the necessity to the design education evolve to the next level. And I would like to hear from you, what, in your opinion, is this next level? Because not just to I know, to take a designer and put him inside a business university. Not about it, I suppose. What do you think? What is the next level for designers? Although to learn design too, of course.
You're correct. And in fact, another thing is that we have to think about the fact that we live in a complex system. And the things that we do, even that seem to be simple, impact the entire world. In the book I've just finished writing, I talk about air conditioners. You turn on your air conditioner because it's really, really hot outside. And what that does, though, is it takes the heat from inside your house and puts it outside. So it adds to the amount of heat outside. And in fact, it puts more heat into the atmosphere than it takes from your home because, well, it's called the second law of thermodynamics, because nothing is completely efficient. And so the lack of efficiency means it creates some heat in trying to remove the heat from your house. Now, so what difference does that make? Well, it's just a small air conditioner in this relatively small house or apartment, so it doesn't make much difference, does it? Well, there are 2 or 3 billion air conditioners in the world. That does make a difference. So the hotter it is, the more we have to use our air conditioners. And the more we use our air conditioners, the more we heat up the atmosphere. And the more we heat up the atmosphere, the more we have to use our air conditioners. That's a cycle, though, that takes place over the whole world. And it's very slow. It might take 5 or 10 years for this difference to be big enough to make an impact. So people have trouble understanding that. They have trouble understanding the small things that happen. But that would magnify by the millions and billions of people on this earth make a huge difference. The same with plastics. Plastics at one point were thought, oh, they're a wonderful thing, because they are. You can make wonderful things out of plastic that it's very difficult to do with anything else. But pretty soon it got to be so simple and so cheap that people deliberately made things, hey, we make you dishes and plates and spoons and utensils that you never have to wash. You just use it once and throw it away. It's so cheap. Well, as a result, we have more waste plastic than fish in the ocean. It's gotten to be a very horrible problem, but for each person, it didn't seem like much. So that's one problem. And so I'm calling it humanity-centered design, that we want to design for all of humanity, which doesn't mean just people. It means all living things, and for that matter, the environment and atmosphere and oceans and land. So yes, so learning about business and learning the language of business and learning the new in the business, yes, but also as we start doing these major things, they're political. And politics is not a bad thing. There may be bad politicians, but the business of politics is necessary because different people have different points of view and they often will contradict one another. And so how do you make a decision about how to go forth when there are conflicts? You can't decide which is best because people may argue with each other, but my finding when you have sensible people arguing with each other, even though they completely disagree, if you step back and think about it, you can see that each one is correct from their point of view. And so the way you have to work with this is let everybody understand that they have different points of views, and then try to figure out how you can make a compromise or maybe even make a completely different solution that makes everybody happier. Usually you can't satisfy everybody, and that's, again, the art of politics, which eventually has to make a decision. Because almost anything that's good for most of society turns out to be bad for some of society. And so that's a difficult decision. But again, if designers are going to have an impact in the world, they have to be part of this decision making.
Connecting with that and talking about your book, your approach in your book drives the vision of humanity-centered design to break some walls and separations, putting paradox on a table where everyone can be examined as a full because they are part of an ecosystem. I know we have to provoke, but do you believe we are prepared for this conversation these days?
Well, it depends upon who you mean by we. There are many we's who are prepared, in fact, already doing the conversation. But there are many vested interests, many of which don't understand or believe in what we are saying, and many of which who are trying hard to do it, but are finding all sorts of difficulties, and many of whom are fiercely against it. And you face that in Brazil because you have one of the world's largest ecosystems in the Amazon region, which is being destroyed. It's being destroyed in order to give us woods, give us all sorts of goods that actually come from the Amazon and are actually quite useful in the world. But destroying the Amazon forests are going to change the climate and change a lot of the conditions that will not and cannot be repaired quickly. So, but again, it isn't easy to say we should stop. And I don't have to explain this to you.
Yeah, you are right. And I think, please, Rafael, is my...
No, continue, please.
No, you are right. And I think the most difficult situation to talk about that, it's about maturity of designers. I think this is the main point of my question, connecting with Burichi spoke. Please.
Yeah, I don't know if we are talking about maturity, just maturity, because I would like to talk more about levels. Because when we're talking about this, when we talk, I don't know, in my opinion, please correct me if you want, but we are talking about senior people, more experienced people. They need to have this approach, this perspective, this point of view about the world. But when you are a beginner, it's more difficult because you need more experience, you need more to live more. I don't know, something like that. And yeah. I would like to know your point of view about that, because we are living this moment in the design industry, this phenomenon about the huge migration of professionals, new beginners, a lot, persons who are, I don't know, learning design in a different source.
We are seeing that here in Brazil, right, Rafael?
Yeah, I suppose in the world, not just in Brazil, but this situation probably bring to the industry people without the correct or the wanted experience to make these decisions, to have these these, I don't know how can I say, I forgot the word now, but this influence in the company. And what are your opinion about that? Because sometimes I see these beginners a little anxious to have this influence, but actually they can't have this influence. And how we can balance these necessities to look the world, to look the necessities of the planet and the ecosystem, but being a junior designers who has no impact or influence in this kind of moment?
Yes, I completely agree with the points you've raised. In fact, in writing this book, this is not the real book, by the way, it's just the cover. But notice the words. It's designed for a better world, meaningful, sustainable, and humanity-centered. Now, I usually test my books as I'm writing them. I believe in prototyping and testing, and I do so by teaching a class. So I taught actually 2 classes on the book. The students liked the first class so much they insisted I teach a second class. And then they said, so where can we learn more about this, and where can we get jobs or we can put this into practice? And I had no answers. And I also pointed out that if they understood everything in this book, and when they got a job as a designer and they tried to complain that they weren't doing the right things for the world, for sustainability, they would be fired. So, but this is true of every field. If you try to take the people who are leading the field, doing new things, doing great things, maybe changing the way a business is structured, or maybe a foundation is run, they aren't the new graduates usually. It's rare to find a new graduate who has that breadth. It's people with a lot of experience. In fact, in politics, we really want, basically, the ideal is that politicians work their way up. They have a small local office, maybe in their city to start with, and then maybe in their region or state, depending upon what the country calls it. And then maybe in the country, but even it takes a while to get the experience to take the higher levels. And I think that's true of all fields, and it's true of design, that you need to know not just what the university teaches. The problem with the university is universities have developed a very bad way of teaching and of equipping themselves, because the best universities in the world, they're called research universities, want people who are really good at research. And so they have to be experts in their fields. In fact, the better universities all want the best expert in their field. Well, the best way to be the best expert in the field is that it's a very small field, very specialized. Maybe to be the really best expert, I tell people I like to be the best expert in the field, and the way I do that is I make sure I'm the only one in the field. The trick there is I have to choose a field that will turn out to be important. But as a result, though, most of the professors, first of all, have never worked in a company. They've only they've gone to school their whole lives, including when they got their first job, it was in a school teaching or doing research. And second, they only know their field. And even no matter what their field, if they're in computer science, they understand one part of computer science, they don't understand all the other parts. And if they're a chemist, they understand one kind of chemistry. If they're a designer, they understand one kind of design. They don't understand the other kinds. And that's not going to work. What we need are people who have this broad education, not narrow and deep, which is what the universities produce, but broad. So you know something about all the disciplines. Because when you're trying to do something in the world, you have to use the expertise of all the different fields. We do need those specialists, those narrow disciplined people, but they're not the ones who are going to change the world. The ones who change the world are the ones who have the broad education, who know how to make use of all of the special findings. Well, design could be that, because design has some special features. First of all, design has no contents. Design is about methods, a whole bunch of methods. But what I like about that is that the methods can be applied to any problem, because it's a way of thinking, a way of approaching a problem. In fact, I have a rule which says, do not solve the problem you are asked to solve, because it's usually the symptoms. That's why I don't ask people what their needs are, because they will tell me the symptoms that they have. It's good to know that, but I then have to find out what is the cause of the symptoms. I want to approach the underlying causal factors. And that's important in any field. So designers could play a role in any part of a company or organization or country by using this kind of thinking. But it doesn't happen right away. And as you point out, the young designers coming out of school will not have that breadth. It's impossible to get, no matter how good the university is at training. First of all, the university knowledge is abstract. It's not applied, because the professors who never worked in companies, they don't know this knowledge is wonderful. It really sounds good, and you can do your project, and it's exciting. But when you actually try to build it in the world and let people use it, it doesn't work. or it's too expensive, or it's not reliable enough. So you have to learn about the real world. And that takes time, and it's hard. And so what I think is that every design group ought to have a few people who have this experience and general knowledge to move and put design in a good spot. But not everybody has to do that. First of all, some are too young, but second of all, some people just don't want to. Some people like to be the world's expert or in some particular topic, and we need that. But we need the mix. We need both kinds. So this is going to be very hard because that first of all, what I'm asking for is hard, but second of all, it requires changing how we educate designers and changing the role that designers think they will be playing. And exactly as you pointed out, Raphael, that you can't just rush in and do it. You know, I've taught business students. When I was at Northwestern University, I was teaching in the in the Kellogg School of Management. And every business student thinks that when they graduate, they will become a major leader in their company. No. There are two different things that happen. First of all, no, they get appointed to some very low job because they have to learn the company and learn the business. Second of all, when they do get appointed to be a major leader, a large number of them discover that they hate it. They don't like that. All they do all day is be confronted with problems. When I was a vice president, it used to be I was really excited by all the technology and all the things we were building and the new users and new devices and so on. But no, as a vice president, all I had was people coming into my office every day with problems or new fires, basically, fires that had to be put out. And so I could go in with no idea of what I was going to do that day. And I would be incredibly busy the whole day because no matter what, every day there was a new problem that I had to step in to solve. I had hour appointments to start with. Pretty soon I said, no, I only have half-hour appointments to fit everybody. Pretty soon, no, I have 15-minute appointments to fit everybody. I used to have lots of dinners, meetings at dinner, and then pretty soon I had to have meetings at lunch, and then pretty soon I had to have meetings at breakfast. It's for me, it was actually interesting. I was learning new things, but a lot of people hate that life. So we have to find the right people who enjoy it, who have the right knowledge, who have the right breadth and understanding, and the right value system. And that won't be everybody.
Yeah, I think it's very important to bring it for our conversation, because sometimes I see these designers putting this weight as an obligation in their career. I need to save the world. I need to be this designer who will change everything. But no, you won't.
Actually, we do need a few people who have that. I really want to save the world. I want to be the designer that changes everything. I don't care if I have a large salary. I just need enough money that I can live and accomplish things that are major. And we need people like that. Yeah. And they will be the leaders. But it will take them a while to become leaders. You don't become the leader on day one. And you have to learn to lead, for example. You have to learn to convince people. You have to learn to motivate people, excite them. And a friend of mine just got promoted to be vice president at a very, very large company, one of the largest in the world, actually. And I told him his life was going to change dramatically, and that he wouldn't have any time. And he's very good and knowledgeable about design affairs and how design should be done. And I said, actually, that would not be your most important skill. Your most important skill will be that of psychiatry. Because being a major manager, director of people, your job is to be a psychiatrist. because people will fight with each other, they will disagree, they'll have different personalities, and you have to figure out how to actually get good value out of each of these people, even though they're completely different.
And you wrote a LinkedIn post explaining the difference between humans and humanity and how important it is to understand the context. And for me, you bring a vision to activism beyond design professionals' work. For me, you are talking about humanity activism. Could you walk us through more about why it's so important designers discuss more about humanity-centered design?
Well, in 1971, a famous designer at the time, Victor Papanek, wrote, most people know this, but I'll say it again anyway. He wrote a book called Design for the Real World. And the very first sentence of that book was, there is no profession more dangerous than design. Actually, he said more dangerous than industrial design, but in those days, industrial design was the big field. Today, I think he would say design, all kinds. And why is that? Because designers make things that, well, these are my words, but it's what he was saying, destroy the environment in mining and manufacturing, instead of them making things that for people to buy, even though they don't have any need for it, any use for it, and it doesn't last long and it breaks and all that. And then he said, well, maybe there is one field that's even worse. And that's advertising that convinces people to buy this stuff that is worthless. Well, he tried. So Papanek was too early in his time. And what he did was, instead of making friends of all his favorite, the rest of the design field, people got very angry with him. But also, I think he was wrong in one sense. It's what we were just talking about. It isn't the designer's fault, because the way the designers are trained and used, they don't have any authority over what they're doing. So that was a major problem. So I decided that I'd written many, many books on how to make things easier to use, easier to understand. Books about human error, which I said is to a large extent done by design error. It leads you into it. And one of the reasons I'm on the show is because these books have been effective. They're used widely. They're well known, but they're relatively small in their impact. Sure, they make our devices easier, better. But that isn't going to change the world. So I said, I don't have many books left in me. I'm 86 years old. I can't tell you how many more I will write, if any. And I therefore want to actually go out with a book that makes a difference in the world. And this is kind of like Raphael said, I couldn't have written this book years ago. I didn't have the breadth and the full understanding. And in order to write the book, even though I have a lot of experiences in many areas, I had to talk to people all around the world about the various issues. I had to read many, many, many books. I had to do a lot of learning to put it together. And yes, I said, I think it's one of the things is the design. I really think design is the proper field because it's a design. It's a field not like most academic fields where you do a lot of thinking and you publish papers and that's how you get promoted and that's how you get known. It's a field where we're actually building and putting things out in the world. We might be building physical things. They might be digital. There might be podcasts like this where we're building knowledge. They might be organizational structure. They might be new procedures, but we're building, creating, and we have to see that they work. And first of all, so we're a field of doing, practice. And second, we focus on people. So when we talk about the world's societal problems, there are many, many different fields that understand these problems, they talk about them, and they work on them. But they almost always optimize the work they're doing for cost or time or efficiency. They don't optimize it for the lives of the people that they're working with. They don't understand that actually we should not be building things for people. Because that's like the colonists, the people in Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese and the Spanish and others. And in fact, South America is colonized in different parts by different parts of Europe. The United States was a colony for a long time. And again, it was France and Great Britain and Spain. And we ourselves were horrible colonists. I mean, we stole a lot of land from Mexico. We have been colonizing in other parts of the world. The British colonized India. But even the good countries that were trying to be good, so take England, which for a while was trying to do its best, they were still ruled by their business people who were simply trying to make money. But a lot of the British civil servants tried to actually help the people, but they didn't understand the people. They simply took their ideas of what was good in England and they tried to apply it in Africa, in Latin America, in India, and the same with all the other countries. And no, if we go into a community as designers and say, oh, I'm going to sit back and study you and understand what your problems are. Here's your solution. We are acting like the English, like the colonizers, saying, we know what's best for you. Now, the people who live in the country don't have to study themselves to know what their problems are. They know what their problems are. And there's really lots of intelligent people there. They don't have to be educated to be intelligent. They understand their problems and they're often working to devise solutions. They need help. One problem they face is that they mostly can attack the symptoms. It's difficult for them to attack the underlying issues. Even if they know what they are, those are bigger and more complex and difficult. And so I believe that designers ought to come to them and be facilitators and mentors and help them find resources and help them approach the larger problems. But it is the people who live in the country that have to be leading the solution to the things that are problems for them. And so that's the humanity-centered part of this book. And the sustainable section is that here's where the design community, the business community must be in alignment about doing things in a way that makes it a better world, but that doesn't bankrupt the company in the process. And there are ways of doing some things that are really good. That may actually save the company money. Because when a company is putting out pollution, dirty air and dirty water and throwing away things, they're throwing away money. And if you could only show them how to reclaim the valuable resources that are part of that makes the air dirty, that makes the water dirty, etc., they might save money in the long run. So that's what the sustainability is about. And I talk about the circular economy, which is by now well known, but not very well used. And meaningful is that we have to convince people. And we have to do that not by jargon, but by things that people understand. If the temperature of the atmosphere increases by 1.8 degrees Celsius, it'll be horrible. What? It increases from when? What's the beginning point? The beginning is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s. You mean if it increases by 1.8 degrees since the 1700s, that's horrible? It increases more than that every day. What are you talking about? Those numbers don't make any sense to the average person. And they make sense simply because the scientist doesn't really talk. They're not talking about weather. They're not talking about the weather where the temperature is varying all over the place. They're talking about climate, where they're talking about the heat capacity of the atmosphere. For the atmosphere of the entire Earth, a 1 degree change there is a huge amount of heat. But the average person doesn't know what heat is. Heat, they think, is something that keeps them warm. No, heat is a technical term about energy. So why don't they talk about this in terms that the people will understand? And the same with the gross domestic product, which is a number that we use to characterize the value of a nation. No, it doesn't. It's a horrible measure. In fact, every major economist in the world goes around telling you how bad the GDP is, but we still use it. First of all, it has two problems. First of all, it counts spending. you can do spending for evil. You can do spending to pollute. And it's good because it raises the GDP. It doesn't determine whether you're doing good or bad. It just says how much money is the country spending. The second thing, it takes a complex organization like a country and summarizes it with one number. You shouldn't do that. There are many, many different components. There's a group at Oxford, a group of economists. They call themselves the donut economists. And what they do is they have a wonderful way of displaying, well, let's take a look at how well this country is doing and all the features that impact the ecology. So they draw a donut and they show coming out of the top all that. Actually, I have it right here someplace. And then for the inside, but here's a picture of, yeah, so what you want to do is you want to show, that's for the GDP, those arrows. If the arrow goes outside the boundaries, you're in trouble. But if it goes outside the boundaries, it's one of them is climate change, another is the biodiversity loss, land conversion, nitrogen or phosphorus loading, ocean acidification, freshwater withdrawals, etc. So that shows you how well your country is doing compared to other countries. And then on the inside, you should have the societal issues, which in this case is income and work, peace and justice, political voice, social equity, gender equity, housing, education, health. And again, you can say, oh, this country, ooh, look at that. It's bad in food. It's not so good in education. It's really good in social equity and income and work. And that's a much better way of describing it and more understandable. And moreover, it tells you what direction you have to work in. The GDP doesn't. So those are my three themes. There's one other theme, which is that the world is artificial almost. And what I do is I have a photograph. That photograph is sitting here taking a picture looking out that window. And I can see the city. I can see Mission Bay in the distance. I'm at pretty high up in the air. That helps. Mission Bay in the distance, and it's a recreational area. And I can see palm trees, and I can see wonderful vegetation, and I can see the city of San Diego. And then in the distance, I can see the mountains of Mexico. Well, the mountains are real, but almost everything else is fake. I mean, not fake, but artificial. It's like palm trees, all the vegetation. Well, this used to be a steep hill, and I have a nice flat lawn in front of me, growing plants. That means they took a bulldozer and they made it flat. The palm trees were all planted. We have lots of animals here, but they're all here because the ecology was artificial, which though attracts them, and they can live here. And Mission Bay, which is a wonderful recreation area, used to be a swamp, and it was turned into a recreational area. And of course, the buildings of the city are artificial. But that means everything is artificial. The notion of a nation, the boundaries, the laws that we use, the kind of justice system we have, the kind of government we have are all invented. They were designed by people, not by designers. They've been designed for tens of thousands of years, but designed they were. But if they were designed, maybe designers can get us out of the problem. If the problem is design, maybe design is also the solution. So that's the starting point of the book. Yeah, so in other words, I am trying to tackle the big major problems of time. Actually, I haven't even tackled all of the problems. I only tackled the ones that I thought I had some expertise in, and the expertise was understanding the technical issues. But the real difficulty of all of these issues are not the technology. It's human behavior. But that's something designers should know about, because we are designing things for people. We are the interface between people and technology for much of what we design, and you have to know people. Now, we don't train people in that necessarily. We have it a little bit in user experience design and interaction design. But many of the best designers I know were trained as psychologists or trained in the social sciences and anthropology or sociology. I myself was trained first in engineering and then in psychology and cognitive science. Because knowing people, focusing on people is one of our strengths.
Great, great. And I don't know, maybe you already talked about your mainly goal, I don't know, but I would like to hear from you, I know a summary of that, but what are your goal for the book in regard to the industry? A kind of new paradigm in design or in the industry, yes, or the industry or the world? I don't know.
It's the industry. I would like the book to be read across the world. And I know it's going to be read in China. My biggest audience at the moment, by the way, is China. And the second biggest audience is Italy. And Latin America is big, but smaller than those. And I'd like it to be read by designers because I'd like it to talk about how we teach design. So I'd like it to be read especially by design people, the faculty in design courses. But I really want it to be read by decision makers, by people in the corporate world and the political world. Now, most politicians are really too busy to read, but a good politician has a good staff. And I know the politicians I know best are the United States Congress. But when I was at Apple, I had to go and try to convince people. At Apple, I helped get the Wi-Fi ban. And at Apple, I helped get the high definition television standards. And the way that worked is I spent weeks and weeks at Apple understanding all the technology issues. And then I spent about a week or longer in Washington, not with the Congress, but with people who work at Apple, learning about the people I was going to talk to in the Congress and their staffs, and learning about what they cared about and who their staffs were. And then I also went in the halls of Congress and met with representatives and senators, and more importantly, their staffs, because a good representative or a senator has a really good staff and they understand the issues. They're the ones who have time to read and think about all these issues and go to committee meetings and go to the science centers, for example, or economic centers. And they're the ones who tell their bosses how they should decide. So, but that's the political situation. And it was interesting because when I testified before the Federal Communications Commission, which is the organization that actually allocates bandwidth for both for television and for Wi-Fi and other things, I knew by name every one of the commissioners. I knew what the commissioners cared about, and I could therefore answer their questions in the way they understood. And there were some people next to me. There was a professor who was testifying because he was an expert in the technology, but he didn't know, nobody bothered to tell him what kind of information the commissioners needed. He kept telling them all this technical stuff, which I found interesting, but I'm sure none of the commissioners understood a word of what he was saying. And so you have to understand, I have come to understand the different languages we use. And I don't mean Portuguese, Spanish, English, I mean technical languages. When I read a lot of the stuff from the left-wing progressives, if you will, who are saying very important things about equity and about society and the way that people are treated unfairly and the way the power structures work, when I talk to them in person, we usually have a good conversation and we understand each other. When I read what they have written, I cannot understand it because they have a special language, a way of talking that makes no sense to me. And we can't do that. Every field has its own specialized language. But we have to talk in ways that are meaningful to the people who matter, making decisions, or for that matter, having to live in the world with these decisions. So we have to talk in everyday language.
Great.
That's what you must do. If you had people who talked only about we managed to get it down from 374 GBs to your audience would be very small.
I look forward to reading your book. I'm very anxious to know and to know more.
Unfortunately, you have 5 months to wait. It comes out March 21.
No, that's okay.
We'll be waiting for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Well,
a little time to make this.
Well, also that gives time for translators. So let's get some. I would love to have both Spanish and Portuguese translators. Yeah. And the problem, of course, I face in Latin America versus Europe is, should the translator be in Spain or in Mexico or Colombia, or should it be in Brazil or in Portugal? Because the language is different and the words will be slightly different.
Yeah.
Wow. Unfortunately, time is up. We could stay here learning from you all night. This conversation was very inspiring. And as always, we learn a lot from you teaching us and sharing so much content. It's an honor to be able to have this answer and moments with you.
I don't think of myself as teaching. I think of myself as having a conversation with you.
It was great. And again, thank you for your time, patient answers. As I comment, it was amazing. I'm very happy to.
I'm sorry for your confusion about the correct day the last month when you thought this meeting was.
That's my life. Because I have so many different people talking to. I often I make errors when I enter things in my calendar, or sometimes people give me 3 different dates and I put all 3 in, and then I forget to delete the wrong ones.
And you called me and I can't shoot.
I can't connect to you. What's the matter? And you are saying, why is he trying to connect to me now?
I was very nervous in that.
With every problem in the world were as easily resolved as that one, life would be much better.
Great.
And now we have thank you a lot to have you here with us again, and it was a great pleasure. Burici, Rafael, tell me, this experience.
This talk probably was the only talk of our list that I had no idea what could be happening.
The way that we will go,
because as we said in the beginning of this video, Don Norman asked us to make this or to do this conversation without script. And because that I didn't know what could be happening. But it was very, very interesting.
I think I agree.
Especially because one speech about the levels.
I like that. I like your question. Was very important. He brought about changing the word, right? But he told us about there are levels, and you have to know yourself, to know where are you and what you can do, right?
I think we brought a good perspective about it, and especially we brought I don't know, but a pragmatic. I am using a lot this word, but a realistic view and layers about it, because I think we are talking a lot during this Good Morning UX, this project, about this perspective to not to save the world, because who know us know that we don't like this perspective to save this great thing, but I think we are talking a lot about this, a lot to the importance and the impact of designers in the industry, in the world. And we kind of finished this subject today,
Yeah, yeah.
bringing this perspective about the different approach, people who maybe don't want to save the world, and it's okay, that's okay, it's not problem. And I think it was the most important part in this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think Norman, as always, brought a light, right, about that kind of subject. And like you said, we spoke about that so much here in your programs, and now we have Donald Norman bringing that. So okay.
Yeah. And of course, you can, I don't know, you can bring us your feedback.
Yeah, you can agree and disagree. Right?
Disagree.
Yeah, and you can criticize, you can comment. I think it's very important to open this discussion more and more.
Yeah.
Because if you are so quiet about that, will not improve your knowledge, your action within companies. So we have to discuss, and we have to be smart when we open discussions. So please, here it's a space that we are open for that.
And I think these subjects that we brought today is a kind of list of the subjects that we have been focused
building. Yeah.
Because this subject about education, the necessity to rethink the education, to improve,
to go deeply in something, right?
Our real impact or real obligation as designers in the industry. All this content, all these subjects is very, very important. And of course, I would love to hear from you about it. What do you think? Do you think the designers need to save the world, need to want to have impact in the world?
And how to do that? How to do that, right? How to save the world in your perspective. This is important.
Or what kind of gap you feel in your career?
You are feeling,
trying to you feel in your career trying to do this. It's a kind of good content to bring us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, people, that's it. Please join us. Subscribe to the channel, the design team. It's very important for us. Share this content. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, please share this content. And tell us, like we are speaking here, tell us what you are thinking about that, because it's very important. And join us in your Telegram. It is in Portuguese. But if you want, you can learn Portuguese with us there. But there are a lot of people writing in English if you ask.
Sometimes. If you are trying to learn other language,
Portuguese,
Normal, Normal, you can try this in Telegram.
Yeah, your Telegram.
You welcome, of course, and please.
Yeah, all information will be here in your description, so you can connect us, enter your social network. So please go ahead, do that,
and send us suggestions for guests.
Yes, good idea.
These new guests that we have been talking until now. I don't know. Some names were suggested by
your followers,
audience.
Yes. So you can yes. When, I remember that someone told us when Don Norman will be interviewed by you guys.
And I make jokes about that. Oh,
yeah. We have an expression here in Brazil. When Don Norman he came here in design team, we will zerar a vida. There is no expression in English for that, but you can write. You understand?
Actually, it has a expression, but I don't know. So, but it's about to finish a game.
Yeah, it could be something. Yeah.
There is an expression, but I am not a gamer. But I know there is this expression when you finish your game in PlayStation.
So when we achieve something important in your life, you finish the game. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So,
expression exists.
Rafael, that's it.
That's
it, right?
Until the next.
Until the next one. And that's it, guys. I have to thank you so much for this time because we are doing that for you, only for you. So,
and for me too.
Bye. Selfish. So, okay, bye.